Hello everybody, welcome to Phoenixville Public Library for our presentation tonight by Joe Varady, who is the Vice President of the Historical Society of the Phoenixville area and a lifelong Phoenixvillian. Welcome to those of you in our community room and those of you on Zoom. Those on Zoom, if you have questions tonight during the presentation, please type them into the chat and I will relay them to Joe. All right, without further ado, Joe, take it away, and thanks for joining us.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate you giving up your time, and appreciate your appreciation of local history. I was actually, back this up a second, start with my grandfather. Started to jump to my dad for a second, because my dad's kind of where my story starts, but, are we moving here? Here we go, Tales of Phoenixville, title page of my book. There's my grandfather, Andrew Varady, who came here, was born in 1877, came here in 1899, sailed across the Atlantic because people from his town had written back and said there is work in Phoenixville. And so he came here and he lived on Cinder Street and he worked in the iron mill for a number of years, and then later he worked for the Reading Railroad. So that's my great-grandfather, Andrew Varady. I am fourth generation Phoenixville. This is my dad. I love to call this Indiana Dad. He looks like Indiana Jones here. He's got the bow and arrow. He's got a knife tucked in his belt. He's got binoculars. This is taken on Virginia Avenue. He was born on Morgan Street, and then later, about 1950, they moved to Virginia Avenue. And so here he is, ready to go out exploring. And here he is, much later in his life, in a mine in Tucson, Arizona, that I'm sure he wasn't supposed to be in. And he kind of has that Indiana Jones feel, even though he wasn't going for it. Yeah, so, my dad. Here I am with him as a kid. We're cleaning off a specimen that he had just collected at the Brookdale Mine. So that is at the golf course just south of town. And here we are fossil hunting. I'm not sure where this is. This might actually be at Brookdale. It looks like the trailings, but the old rock hammer that we used to have, and always going out with my dad looking for stones, fossils, and arrowheads. And then later, he went to Phoenixville Junior Memorial High School. I taught there when it was Barkley Elementary School. I taught 5th grade. This is me as a 5th grade teacher. I tried to make it very entertaining, edutainment, right? I was always bored coming through school. I was very interested in, history and all the things they had to teach, but the teachers, I felt, weren't doing a great job presenting it. So I said, well, you know what, the last thing I would have thought was that I would go back to school, right, as a teacher, but I ended up doing that. I wanted to be an art teacher until I realized there was only one art teacher per like 5 schools, and the position didn't come up very often. So I went back, got my master's degree, and became an elementary school teacher. And this is Samuel Pennypacker. My dad would tell me stories from Samuel Pennypacker's Annals of Phoenixville, and then I would tell those stories to my kids. He later became governor of Pennsylvania. So his book, Annals of Phoenixville, kind of was the core, or the impetus for me writing Tales of Phoenixville. I would tell these stories to my kids as part of our history lessons to try to root history here in Phoenixville, make it come alive for them a little bit. And when I stopped teaching in 2003, I said to myself, well, no, now what I'm going to do, the stories are all going to die. I want the kids to know them, and other people too. Why should it just be the kids? And so I wrote Tales of Phoenixville over the next couple of years while my kids were young. So let's take a look at the history underneath us. So here we see the Foundry building up top, and then underneath all this history. We show up here during the Anthropocene up here at the tippy top. The rest of it was not us, and so there is tons of history under our feet that we don't always think about. So let's go over that a little bit. This is part of a mural that I painted at the Historical Society to show what life was like during the Paleozoic era, about 500 million years ago, 541 million years ago, I believe, is the start of the Cambrian explosion. So 400 I'm sorry, 4.5 billion years ago, life somehow came to Earth. Earth was created, started to cool down, nothing happened for a long time, somehow life came here. I have comets here showing the idea it may have come through panspermia. I have the lightning showing the concept that it might have evolved in a pool of primordial goo. We don't really know how life started here, but it did. And we have the evidence in the form of stromatolites, which are ancient mats of microbial organisms that just formed into big, like, round boulders. They're still formed today. They're still made today by the same kind of organisms, but they're some of the oldest things on Earth. So then we had this is the entire mural going up the stairway. I'm only half done. It's going to go around the corner and continue with Carboniferous period. But this was the time when Phoenixville was a shallow sea. We were near the equator. The poles were different. So if you could picture what the barrier reef looked like, and maybe that's a little bit about what Phoenixville may have looked like. And I put some of the organisms as we go up through the different periods. It's clearly marked if you ever visit the Historical Society. Here we see the Devonian period. This is the rise of fish when we finally have, well, actually fish started earlier during the Ordovician, but they didn't have jaws, right? When they finally got jaws, that's when they became dangerous, right? And this little guy here, this is a sea scorpion from the previous era, the Silurian, when they ruled. This guy's like 6 feet long. Well, here we see one getting eaten by a 30-foot long bony fish. So, yeah, that's what was living here in Phoenixville. Now, here during the Cambrian explosion, we had some really fantastical creatures. This guy had 3 eyes, and he had a trunk with a claw on the end of it. And he's snatching that worm up out of the sand. Trilobites, of course, were a constant throughout the Paleozoic era. They showed up early and they lasted all the way up almost through the Carboniferous period. Here we see them trolloping around the bottom looking for things to eat. Neat little arthropods. A belemite. So, belemite here. A belemite fossil was found at 6th Avenue and Main Street, what used to be Buck's Pond. And it ended up at the Historical Society, where my mentor, Paul Cusco, we met because I was listening to one of Paul's talks, and he showed these items, and he said these were kind of mystery items. We think they might be antler, but they were highly polished, almost like an agate. I knew what they were immediately because my dad was a paleontologist and owned all of the earth echoes at the James Way Mall and all of that stuff. I grew up with this, so I was like, that's a belemite fossil. So it's really cool. Belemites were like little squid, and we have a fossil of one found right here, just a couple blocks away from us. That's an incredible find, and we do have that in the collection at the Historical Society. And here they are swimming around, so you could picture this is Phoenixville under 30 feet of warm water. And you got these little squids and trilobites trucking around and the sea scorpions eating everybody. And okay, now the land changes. So time goes on, the land rises. About during the Devonian period, the time those fish started to really get those jaws. Now this is a little bit later. This is probably during the Triassic. So now we've got terrestrial creatures. This is a phytosaur tooth. Now this is not the one that I found. I found one that looked almost identical at the Fairview Tunnel, fossil hunting with my dad. There is a band of 14-inch shale that runs underneath there at the escarpment, and it was carved out when they made room for the railroad. And we used to be able to get back there. I tried it recently and it's just all flooded. But found a phytosaur tooth there. What's a phytosaur? That's a phytosaur. Looks like an alligator, but it's not. It came way earlier and then died out, and then crocodiles and alligators evolved later and took on very similar form because it works. Here you see him munching down on a hadrosaur. Now we don't have hadrosaur fossils here in Phoenixville, but we have them in Haddonfield, New Jersey. So New Jersey and Pennsylvania probably connected, and you could imagine that we definitely, if we had the phytosaurs, we probably had the hadrosaurs too. We just don't happen to have the right conditions to preserve the bones. What we do have are the conditions for tracks, and this is a growliter. It is a bipedal theropod, meaning it was probably warm-blooded, carnivorous, ran around like Coelophysis, or maybe like a velociraptor type creature. So you can imagine coming out your door in the morning and seeing this guy, saying, "Good morning!" He used to live right here. How do we know he used to live right here? Here's my dad with some of the tracks. I can remember going up to Douglasville and excavating these tracks. It's funny, it's just a little ravine, creek running through it, and it's got, you know, typical weeds and bushes, and there's a basketball court on one side and an apartment building on the other. And we go down into this little ravine, and darn if he doesn't start pulling out these dinosaur tracks. And today we have them at the Historical Society. I've mounted them, and we have a key at the bottom showing where the tracks are. And I even have, oh, there we go, that's the exact one that he was holding here in the article. That's now at the Historical Society. And that's a growler, so we don't have the bones. Bones weren't preserved here, all we have are the tracks, so we can't give it an exact name like Coelophysis. What we do is give it a general classification, a growler. We know it lived here about 200 million years ago during the late Triassic, and it did leave its footprints. Pretty cool. Here I am doing a fossil talk at the Historical Society. Got a cave bear claw here, little mesosaur there. I think it was, oh, Brazillosaurus is what that guy is called. Petrified wood. All right, so the Carboniferous period was a time when this was a big swamp, and that's why this is coal country, right? And why the period was called the Pennsylvania period. Here we got a giant dragonfly. It would have been about 3 feet across. Later we had the Permian period. We got Dimetrodon there, and then we've got T-Rex. We have footprints of this guy in Haddonfield as well. So we know that there were T-Rexes. No, not T-Rex. It was a Tyrannosaurus. I think it was, hold on a second, I wrote it down because I knew I'd forget this one. I knew I'd forget it. It's, I don't know where I wrote it down. I'm not using my cards like I'm supposed to. You guys get the idea. Anyway, it was a Tyrannosaur, but it wasn't Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was slightly smaller in the same family. And then later we have the rise of mammals. We got saber-toothed cats and mammoths, which lived here, we know, because we have their remains in the Port Kennedy Bone Cave. And then I show a Native American here in the front. So, when do we show up? Humans show up about 300,000 years ago, and approximately 2.6 million years ago we entered an ice age, and we've been in that ice age ever since. And so there are interglacial periods where it gets warm, but basically we're still in it. You can see here these ice sheets covering most of North America. We live just south, about 60 miles south of that ice sheet. It stopped, the last one stopped about Quakertown, where Quakertown is now, and that was about 22,000 years ago. 11,000 years ago that ice age ended. And there were people here during that time, we know, because there are remnants of them found at the, let's go past that one. These are the animals that lived here during that time, during the ice age time. These are the types of things that are found in the Port Kennedy Bone Cave. What is the Port Kennedy Bone Cave? Well, it's much like the La Brea tar pits of our area. It was a crack in the ground where animals would accidentally fall in and fall to their death, or couldn't get out, and they would die in the bottom, and the bones piled up for 70,000 years. So, if you figure just one animal ended up in there a year, and it may not have fallen in, when heavy rains come, a carcass may wash in, but either way, that's 70,000 remains of animals right there off the top of your head, yet alone the fact that the smell of decaying things may have attracted other animals. So the Port Kennedy Bone Cave and Valley Forge shows us that these animals were here. There are no human remains that were ever found in the Port Kennedy Bone Cave, but there were hunters. We have one of their fluted points at the Historical Society. Pennsylvania archaeologists dated that to over 10,000 years old. And you can picture hunting these things must have been really tricky, right? Here's things going well, and here's things going not so well. Now in my book, this is where the first story takes up. And it takes up with a small band of these Neolithic hunters, and they're coming down the French Creek, and they are tracking mammoths. And they catch him right here, right about at where Main Street and Bridge Street come. And then there's this epic battle, and if you read my book, you can kind of check it out. And I give a lot of facts in each story. This is one of my big things, right? It's supposed to be, narrative, so it's entertaining, but at the same time, I jam-pack it with tons and tons of facts. Now you can see here, I'm going to go back one. These guys are using spears. This is not the way that they did it. That takes, you got to get way too close to that guy to throw that spear in. Instead, you had a spear thrower. It was something that you held and it lengthened your arm, and then a spear notched onto that. And you threw your spear with your spear thrower from much farther away. I don't know what these guys are thinking. All right, and that's what they're thinking. That's, like I said, things must have gone bad. So now we get up through the Paleo-Indian period when they're hunting mammoths and things like that. Down here we see our dinosaur friends who died 65 million years ago when a huge asteroid about 6 to 9 miles wide hit the Yucatan Peninsula and basically wiped out 90%, no, not 90%, 70% of life on Earth. Yeah, it wasn't as bad as some of the earlier extinctions where it did kill off 90%, and the Earth froze into like a ball of solid ice for a while in there during the Silurian and Ordovician periods we were talking about earlier. Now we're coming up to the Archaic period, transitional period. People are living here for 10,000 years before we come into what we know of as the Indians, the woodland Indians, the Native Americans that lived here. And these are the points that we find here in Phoenixville. These are all from up on the Chico farm on the Black Rock. My dad collected these in the 50s and 60s. I would walk with him in the 70s and early 80s, and I never found. I would give it, "What's this, Dad?" He goes, "Leverite." I said, "Leverite?" He says, "Yeah, leave it right there." Yeah, he picked those fields clean. Now, this is an exciting part of belonging to the Historical Society. My mentor, Paul Cusco, and I, he tracked down this collection, and we drove up to Pennsburg, and we managed to acquire this. This came from a shelter, rock shelter along the Schuylkill between here and Pottstown that we're still trying to locate, called the Arrowsmith Rock Shelter. But these are some pieces. This is rare. We've got burned bone. We've got large canines. I think they may be wolf teeth. There's pottery as well that were all found in this Arrowsmith Rock Shelter. So we know people were here, and here's the evidence. Here's the proof. This bone needle is absolutely incredible. This was found again in that Arrowsmith Rock Shelter. That is now in the collection at the Historical Society, although not yet on display. We just acquired it about 2 weeks ago. This obsidian razor was found at Bucks Pond and 6th Avenue, same place that those Belemite fossils were found. I looked at this and I immediately knew what I was looking at. This is volcanic glass. Volcanic glass does not occur east of the Mississippi. Heck, it doesn't occur east of Yellowstone. There's some cliffs at Yellowstone you can get it. There's some places in Washington you can get it, Washington State, and you can get it from Mexico, but you're not getting it from around here. This stuff gets sharper than steel, so it it gives you the sharpest blade you could possibly get. And you could picture that the natives around here are, using the normal stone tools that they're making from some of the local things like quartzite, but then they're also using some imported materials like jasper, and the nearest jasper is coming from 22 miles north of here at the quarries in Macungie. And we now scientists can look at these and say, oh yeah, that's exactly from this spot. And so we know that they were trading 22 miles to Macungie, but where did this come from, right? So I like to think of a paleo traveling salesman who comes and rolls out a buckskin roll, and he's got these obsidian razors, and he's like, what do you trade for this? You just it cuts anything. So that is unbelievable. This is proof of some sort of Neolithic, at least trade route, that went all the way across our continent. It's found right here in Phoenixville. An absolutely unbelievable piece is on display right now. This is my rendition from the book of the village, as I kind of saw it here, Lenape village, that was at the mouth. There was one at the mouth of Pickering and mouth of Perkiomen. They were probably temporary villages. They lived in wigwams around here for 10,000 years. We know because the archaeological sites show us the post holes in the circles. We can still find those and date them and go, wow, they were living in this same shelter. Why didn't they change it? Well, here's one of the reasons they didn't change it. When you had radiant flooring, so you stack rock in the bottom, and then the fire's heating the rock as well as getting the air, through the floor, but it's heating everything underneath you. You cover it with enough earth that you don't have a fire hazard, but it stays nice and snug and warm in your wigwam. Once a year, at least, in the spring, when the shad ran and the eels ran up the Schuylkill River, all of the people would come together at the river for big fishing days where they would build weirs. Here you can see they stuck sticks in the river to make the weir, to make the fish swim in, and then they're easily corralled and collected. They would fill the drying racks with fish. They would also use nets. These are sinker stones on display at the Historical Society. These were tied to the bottom of the nets, and they found nets that were 100 meters long. Long enough to go across the Schuylkill River. They figured it would have taken at least 20, maybe 40 people to operate them. And so everybody's got their piece of net, and you just, everybody goes nice and slow, and those fish just all end up, I guess, inside of that net. The net is organic. 90% of the Indians, Native Americans' toolkit was leather, wood, bone, all the things that dissolved in our acidic environment. The only thing we have left are the lithics, so we have the stone weights. Here I am standing high atop Indian Rock, and this is Indian Rock has a legend that goes with it. With your permission, I'll do a reading from the Book of Job. It's actually this is an excerpt from Thank You Get My Jokes. I appreciate you. I knew that $5 earlier was going to pay off. I laugh at my jokes. This is actually an excerpt from Annals of Phoenixville, Samuel Pennypacker. I used to read this to my 5th graders every year. About halfway up the Black Rock is a crag at a great height, which juts far out over the towpath and the river beneath. 20 years ago, and this was written in 1872, so 20 years ago in 1850. It could only be approached by a long and difficult path along the rocks, rendered dangerous by steep descents and gloomy from the dense shade of the pines that then covered the whole hill. Then covered, which means sometime between 1850 and 1870, they cut all the pines down on the Black Rock. A stunted cedar grew upon the very verge, and it made the most masculine heart tremble to stand upon the edge and, while clinging to this frail support, look down into the waters beneath. I won't do it. I stand on the rock, but I am not grabbing anything and leaning out. Well, sometime after the settlement, and when the simple natives had been in contact with the whites long enough to acquire their vices, an Indian was once tempted with the promise of a bottle of whiskey to leap 3 times from this crag into the river. Twice he made the terrible plunge successfully, and, returning after the second attempt, wearied with the wonted exertion and bleeding from wounds made from some sharp stones against which he had struck, he sprang again into the stream, never more to reappear. Since that time it has borne the name of Indian Rock. That's from Annals of Phoenixville, Samuel Pennypacker, 1872, when we would think that people were still alive that, remembered more accurately. Again, my mentor, Paul Cusco, who I have muchos respect for, and I disagree on this. He thinks maybe it's a legend. But I think, hey, Pennypacker doesn't say it's a legend. Pennypacker says it's true. So if Pennypacker thought it was a legend, he would have said there's a legend about, and he doesn't say that. So here I am high atop Indian Rock. I couldn't imagine jumping off that into the river. already know. Here I am dressed in buckskin, taking a walk, a group on Earth Day 2, Indian Point, Indian Rock. Here I am with, Indian Point, Indian Rock. It's got two different, I mean, my dad always called Indian Rock, so that's what I kind of grew up calling it. So this is Paul Cusco. He's taught me a lot about the collections at the Historical Society and Native Americans. I think we make a pretty good team. And here is our newly renovated Native American section at the Historical Society. If you get a chance, please stop by and take a look. We do paleontology is coming up the steps, all of that prehistory, and then it dumps you off into the Native Americans, and then we have mining, which is the early history, which we're going to get to in a second. Here's a model of a wigwam that I have. This is kind of our utilitarian case. We've got mortar pestles, the tools that the Lenape used that we still have. They had a lot of tools that we don't have because they're gone. How did they make holes in these things? We know kind of because we have a guess how bow drills work, but we don't know for sure how they made. So this is a huge hole in this donut-shaped rock. Unbelievable, yet alone these things called banner stones, which they used on their addles to weight down the addle, give it more distance, and they would drill a hole all the way through that rock. So unbelievable. Now we're up to, I do believe, 1680. Let's see, 1680. Yeah, Pickering, Charles Pickering comes over. Some people might be interested how I do my pictures in my books. I was a paste-up artist at Boscov's one summer when I was 16 years old, and the artists there, when they did the pictures for the magazine and everything, would get a photograph. They had a whole huge file cabinet. They'd pull out photograph, and they'd slap it on a light table and put a piece of paper over it and trace it. And I go, that's cheating. And they said, if we had to draw everything from scratch, this would take us forever and everything would look like garbage. Like, this is how you do it. And so I was like, oh, okay. So, you know, they get my guide picture, and then you can see from that I got this, and then I fill in details as I wanted. So kind of shows the... And this is a rendition of what Charles Pickering may have looked like. He was a Quaker. He came down the river looking for treasure. He wanted to find gold because the Spanish were finding gold in America, and he was sure he was going to find gold in America. So he starts up the Schuylkill River in 1680 in a canoe probably, or maybe he was walking on the side using Indian trails, but he was prospecting as he went. And eventually he started coming into little teeny weeny pieces of silver ore. And he said, aha, Galena. And he tracked that silver ore all the way up the Schuylkill past the Pickering Creek, and then it stopped. He said, aha, so he backed up, and he went up the Pickering Creek, and now he's still finding it. And he's like, aha, it's coming from up here. And he followed that all the way to Baker Park, right where YMCA is today, and there he started digging into the hill, and he must have gone back to Philly at some time because he had a guy named Tinker come out with him. Tinker's Hill. Anybody hear of it? It's named for this guy, Tinker. So Tinker and Pickering dig out into the hillside. They get 8 flour barrels full of ore. Now they got to get that to Philly. Now how are you getting 8 flour barrels of ore to Philly? Well, how about these gentlemen with the huge canoes, right? So in my story, I give details about all of this and narrative fiction, so I have to fill in some of the gaps. But I figured, hey, the best way to get that ore to Philly is to trade some iron goods, get a little canoe ride down to Kawakanock, which was the Indian village which used to reside where Philadelphia does today. So Galena, silver ore. He took that silver ore, he sent it across the ocean. He was exploring here, he came, here's Philly, Kawakanock, he came up all the way, past Pickering, lost it, came back, went up Pickering, and then found it, the mine hole. And again, 1680, this is the first European to probably show up in these parts.
Where on the Pickering Creek is that mine hole?
Ah, okay, so Baker Park Day Camp is
okay.
here, and the YMCA is right here. There's
no,
that bridge that goes across, and
I forgot you said Baker Park.
yeah. And now this is one of the locations my dad thought may have been what they call Tinker's Cave. Now, I'm not sure, but it would have to date from 1680. That's pretty old, so I'm not so sure, but hey, who knows, maybe. The silver went back to Europe, came back from England, and he gets this little teeny barrel, and he goes in it, and there's like a couple silver bars, and he's like, this is all I get, a couple silver bars. He's like, okay, I'm not going to be a treasure hunter. While the ore was going back and forth, I was training to be a lawyer anyway. I'm going to be a lawyer. So that's what Pickering ends up deciding to be. But now he's got these silver bars, right? So what do you want to do with them? There's lack of currency in the colonies. It's like nobody's got money, nobody's got coinage. So he's like, well, no problem. I'm going to make myself some Spanish bits. So he takes the little Spanish bit he had and pushes it in the sand, and makes the perfect little mold, and then pours the silver in, and yeah, a little file that off. That looks just like a Spanish bit. So, and they were the same, approximately same weight, according to him, right? Because when he got caught, and William Penn comes knocking on his door, he says, Charlie, what are you doing? You know it's against the law to counterfeit, and I really don't want to hang you. And so you could imagine this literally might have been the way that it happened. And you ought to read it in my story. It's kind of funny. I have Charles saying to William Penn, says, what were you thinking? And Charles says, doth seemed a good idea at the time. But he argues that his silver was just as good as Spanish silver, and it weighed the same, so what's the difference? And William Penn said, well, you're counterfeiting, can't do it, so now we got to fine you. Go collect all the silver, give them real Spanish bits, and then collect all the silver and pay a fine. So he did that, but Charles Pickering, Phoenixville's first European resident, first treasure hunter, first counterfeiter, and then Charles disappeared later in time. In my book I have him going out to relieve himself on the back of the boat as he's crossing to England and hits a wave. There goes Charlie watching the boat go, and yeah, we don't know. Now this is one of my dad's maps, which showed up on Facebook, not from my dad, from somebody else, and I was like, I recognize that writing, and sure enough, I went and matched just to make sure, but yeah, this is one of my dad's maps from 1968, and here we can see Tinker Hill Road, where Tinker was. So somewhere in this area is where they dug their exploratory hole. And then here at the Pickering Hunt Club, you had the Chester County mine. We have the Montgomery County mine, the Wheatley mine shaft. We have the Brookdale mine, which is on the Thompson farm, and that's still there. The stack is still there. In fact, that's Baker Park Day Camp's on the other side of this, and there's the culvert, and my dad, this was a different area where he thought maybe the exploratory hole had been, but it's on the floodplain and nothing would have remained of it. And all of this eventually turned into an actual mining district where they had lots of mines in Phoenixville. They opened in the 1850s by a man named Charles Wheatley, and these are models that my dad had made, which are now in the Historical Society and the mining display, which I did not probably do justice to. I mean, he should have done the mining display, but he passed in 2010. But when we renovated the museum, everybody was like, hey Joe, guess who's doing the mining display? I'm like, oh man, I should have paid more attention. My dad's in heaven going, told me to pay attention. So here we are at the Brookdale, the tower, and what this was this was how they ran the steam pumps that kept the water out of the mines. And those mines are filled with water today. And my dad actually got there with the owner of the golf course, and they had huge pumps come in, fire truck pumps, and they tried pumping that thing out, and they couldn't get it down to the first level. They wanted to get in, they tried to get in, but it's amazing that in the 1800s, they kept that thing dry while they mined it out. And what were they mining for here? Pyromorphite. So this is a green mineral, which when melted, turns into lead. I don't know how. Again, my dad was here, he'll tell you exactly how. I don't know how. And this brings us to, the oldest house in Phoenixville, built in 1732, 123 Main Street. South Main Street, North Main Street, North Main Street. That house would have still been here when my next story takes place. By the way, my stories take place, okay, the early one with the mammoth hunters is like 10,000 years ago, right? But the later ones pick up with Charles Pickering in 1680, and then they go approximately every 50 years, 40, 50 years after that. And so one of the stories that I used from 1740 about that, pyromorphite again. At this time, this was all unbroken wilderness west of the Charlestown Road. Charlestown was probably all of 3 houses or a small grist mill or something like that. The Buckwalter Farm is still on Buckwalter Road, and if anybody knows where, what's it called now? It used to be Bob's Haven Deli. There you go, that's what it's called now. It is there, right at that intersection. So the Buckwalter Farm is here, and the next thing north of them would have been Charlestown, which is pretty far. And then the Star Farm would have been in town, and again, that's probably a good 3 miles through wilderness on a small trail. We didn't have big roads, and the fields weren't really cleared at the time, 1740. So at that time, we hear the story of a little girl from the Buckwalter Farm, and actually might do best to just give it to you directly from the words. Samuel Pennypacker himself, 1872. On one occasion, the girl of John Buckwalter was sent for the cows, and after a long search, heard the sound of the bell at a great distance from her home. By the time she had collected the animals together, it had grown dark, and becoming bewildered in the woods, she lost her way. The wolves began to howl about her. The cows huddled together for mutual protection, and the terrified girl crept into the midst of the herd and lay all night safely beside the bell cow. Annals of Phoenixville, Samuel Pennypacker, 1872. So we're still dealing with packs of wolves, right? How do you deal with a pack of wild wolves? That's really difficult. And this little girl was clever, went to the middle of the herd and managed to spend the night. Again, I tell her story in the form of narrative fiction. Try to put yourself myself in her shoes, yourself in her shoes, and yeah, I think it came out pretty good. It's one of my favorites. How do I do my pictures? Again, I look for reference photos and I stitch them together. And so I remember back in 1985, 83, and they were like, someday you're going to do everything on a computer. Art on a computer. And I'm like, well, I can't do art on a computer. Great. Well, now I do all my art on a computer. They got me. Buckwalter Road, there you go, and Charlestown Road. Charlestown named after Charles Pickering, who we've just been introduced to. Buckwalter Road, the Buckwalter Farm, where that little girl got lost in the woods and accosted by wolves all night. That brings us to, are we up to? Yes, the Revolution. This is 1777, when 14,000 redcoats marched through Phoenixville, right up Nuts Path to the Forge. Now we call it Nuts Road. And here it's called the Great Road, or Nuts Path to the Forge. You could imagine it was just unbroken wilderness, or maybe there was an Indian's path, but either way, you and a team had to go out and clear a 10-foot wide road, which meant blowing up or pulling up every tree stump in the way and then flattening it all out through the woods from here all the way to Warwick. That's crazy, right? It's like, that's a lot of work. And that became the Ridge Road, right? Nuts Road runs along the Ridge Road, and it was because Samuel Nutt was one of the ironmasters, and he was connecting his forges. He had the forge in Phoenixville, and he had the forge, actually Valley Forge, sorry, no Phoenixville, yeah, Valley Forge. And he was connecting it to his forge out in Warwick, which was then connected to the one up at Hopewell Furnace. So Meadowbrook Farm. home of the Coates family on that day in September, I think it was September 21st, 1777, when the Redcoats come marching through right up Nuts Road, and they decided Phoenixville's a great place to stop for the night. Great, oh boy. So they said, all right, Hessians up on the south side, and British, you get the north side of Nuts Road. And so the Hessians came upon the Coates farm, and they took everything. And the British were doing the same thing on the other side of the road, breaking into every house that they could, busting up everything. The story is they broke everything they could find and took everything not screwed down. They came to the Meadowbrook farm, once again. We'll hear it from Samuel Pennypacker. To the residence of Moses Coates Jr., the Hessians came in droves as soon as the army halted, and they continued their incursions until the next morning when a guard was obtained. The garden, cellar, and larder were emptied, and the hen roosts soon made desolate. Among other things carried away was a large flock of geese, the last of them, an old gander, pursued through the yard and finally caught around the neck by a huge Hessian who held the bird aloft as he throttled it and cried exultingly to the members of the family, "Dis be's good for the poor Hessian mans." One of the daughters expressed the hope that it would choke him to death, upon which he began to curse and departed with his prey. Samuel Pennypacker. So, there's my Hessian. He's so happy to finally have a meal. And he says to them, "Thank you," and they say, "Yeah, choke on it." Yeah. How do I make my pictures? I want it to be accurate, so I start with a picture of, what a Hessian should look like, and then, it said that it was a little portly, and you kind of see how I end up with what I end up getting there. So this is Cornwallis. Cornwallis goes to the house of Benjamin Boyer. I believe it was Benjamin Boyer. If it's not, somebody will correct me. I got it written down, but no need to get it. So he goes to Benjamin Boyer's house. There, like I said, they're ransacking everything. And he's checking this, going through, just making sure you got everything. And he looks in this room, and he's like, "What's in that room?" And he says, "Those are beehives, sir." And he says, "It's not beehives. They took all their stuff, put it in boxes, and covered it in sheets. Those aren't beehives." So he went in, he ripped it off. "See, look, it's not." He got stung. Wow. So the army stayed here for a couple days because Cornwallis was out of commission. He was stung, who knows, 50, 60 times by bees. I had attempted to write a story called "The Bees That Saved America," because those couple days may have been very important days while Washington maneuvered. These were crucial times in the beginning of the war. We had just almost lost the Battle of the Clouds, which was the Battle of Great Valley. We were all set up to fight, and then torrential nor'easter came in and just doused the whole party. And they said, "War over," and good thing, because we were not in a good position. And they probably would have mopped us up at the Battle of the Clouds, and that would have been the end of the revolution right there. We would have never even made it to Valley Forge. So, luckily, somebody said, "Oh no." And Washington and 10,000 men made his way up the Yellow Springs Road, through Yellow Springs, and then on to the forges in Warwick, where they rearmed and got settled. In the meantime, the British are trying to chase them and ghost them, and then they get caught here in Phoenixville. So if they're stuck here for a little while, now they have to change plans. Like, the heck with Washington, he's out in the wilderness, he's probably going to lure me out there now, I'm going to go this way. So they hooked over the Schuylkill River, they crossed at Jacobs Ford here in Phoenixville. They let the Hessians cross there, by the way, because that was on the outskirts, and there were Continental snipers shooting at them as they're crossing the river. And these poor guys got to cross the river in a straight line, marching in a straight line, and you're getting shot at. So they're singing their hymns, just hoping that they make it to the other side. You can imagine your buddy, poof, he goes down, you're like, "Oh, it's up." So yeah, you got to keep walking. While the British crossed at Fatland Ford, where it was much safer, down towards Philly, and then Washington attempts to cut them off one last time at Germantown, Battle of Chew Mansion. I don't know if anybody knows about it. Yeah, we flubbed that. We had a chance to stop them, we didn't. They took Philly, and we get Valley Forge. You got it. You got it. All right. So anyway, interesting story in my book about this man, General Howe. So Howe is now in charge of the army because Cornwallis is out of commission with bee stings. And one last reading, if you will. This will be my last one. A horse belonging to a son of Moses Coates, then quite a youth, was taken from the pasture field, and it was known the animal was among the British forces. The young man went to the headquarters of the commanding general, and upon making inquiries of some of the attendants about that officer's person, received only insolent and taunting replies. He insisted, however, upon an interview with the superior, and was finally shown into Howe's presence. Can you imagine this kid? He's 12 years old, 13 years old, demanding to see the general of the army. Upon making his errand known, he was treated politely and detained in conversation. The subject of the condition of the American army was adroitly introduced, and every effort made to elicit information from him. At length, however, Howe said to him that he could have his horse if he would go over the Schuylkill and learn, as accurately as he could, the number of Washington's troops. The offer was rejected, and Howe increased it by saying that he would not only return his horse, but would give him in addition 6 guineas in gold. The youth replied with indignation that he could not be bribed to perform an act so base, and when it was found that he would not answer Howe's purposes, he was given permission to search for his horse through the camp and take it away. Imagine the gall on this kid to tell Howe where he can stick his 6 guineas, right? So pretty incredible story. Check it out if you read my book. I give it again from the young boy's perspective. Let's jump now to 1830s, 40s, 50s, all the way up to 1860, the abolitionists of Phoenixville. John Vickers was farthest south in Lionville. He had a pottery business there. He had a safe house so that people would get to him. They would move from there to Abby Kimbers at Kimberton. Her father, Emmer Kimber, and her were both Quakers, as was the Lewis family. And the Lewis family, one of the daughters, this is Grace Anna, her sister was married to another gentleman who was a Fussell, so the Fussells were hiding people too. They were all in on it. And they would take them to Elijah Pennypacker up on White Horse Road, and Pennypacker would then get them to Norristown. So that was just one of the routes that we know about. Of course, the most successful route stations on the Underground Railroad, nobody ever found out about, right? So there were lots of people probably doing this over the course of 40, 50 years, and we just don't know who they are. Good job to them. Kimber Hall, 1787, girls' school. It's in my story. We have slave catchers coming after some escaped slaves, and they track them to Vickers, and Vickers ends up gives up Kimber. They make it to Kimber's, and they're tracking them down. So that's where that comes in my story, Kimber Hall. Elijah Pennypacker. So he's probably Phoenixville's best known abolitionist, and he lived on White Horse Road. Here's his house. He dug a 20-foot tunnel from the basement to an outbuilding where he could, smuggle people. They could go to the outbuilding and then get to the house, and vice versa. I suppose that tunnel is still there today. Grace Anna Lewis back here, she had a hidden room in her bedroom, and when they would come and search her house, they would always say, "Oh, respect a young lady's things," and behind her dresser was a little room where people were hiding. So, these people were courageous. They were breaking the law, but they were doing what they thought was right. So a wagon with a false bottom for hiding runaways. I have a wagon similar to this used in my story. Check it out if you can. Let's go forward another 40 years. It's 1880 now. We've got the Sundance Kid. Let me check my dates for Sundance here. For Harry Longabout was born in 1868 in Montclair at 122 Jacob Street. And in 1887, at age 22, well, he left here at age 15. And at age 22, he stole a gun, a horse, and a saddle from the Sundance Ranch. And they caught him. Threw him in jail for 18 months. So they call him the Sundance Kid, because he stole from the Sundance Ranch. Good thing he didn't steal from the, I don't know, it could have been a lot worse than Sundance, right? So Harry lived here in Montclair. He would have spent a lot of time in Phoenixville. He's played by Robert Redford in the movie. Stood 5'9". He was about 175 pounds. He was an incredible gunslinger, but he didn't like to kill people unless he had to. So he was the gentleman gunslinger. And he and the Wild Bunch, oh, there's his wife Etta. He and the Wild Bunch, I don't have a picture of the Wild Bunch? I do in my book. He and the Wild Bunch had the longest running ring of train and bank robberies in that era, and they were after the era of Jesse James. And so I thought to myself, here's this boy living in Montclair, and he's reading these pulp novels, and these novels are telling about Jesse James and how, you know, this is such a glamorous kind of life. And so I have him, you know, he's basically playing hooky. He knows that if he stays home, he's going to have to do chores. So he sneaks out, goes across the covered bridge that crosses the Schuylkill, says hi to the toll master. He's got his brother's pulp magazine that he stole, and he finds this little spot by the French Creek, and he's reading it, and he's reading about Jesse James when he hears doot, doot, the train's rolling in, and it stops, and so he imagines he's, and so he's playing, you know, train robber there, and it's like, oh yeah, and then 3 years later, he's on his way out west. One of the amazing things about Harry Longabout is that he may have not died in Bolivia, as the official story says. The unofficial story is that he continued to visit Phoenixville for many years afterwards, where he had family, and that when he passed, they secretly buried him in the grave. I talked to a gentleman not 2 weeks ago, the one that we got that frame from, I told you about, from the Aerosmith Rock Shelter, and he said that is his family, and he was at family reunions where they told him that the Sundance Kid used to come to the family reunions. So there's like, not quite firsthand, but you know, it's pretty close. In 2017, a show called Town Trekkers came to Phoenixville with ground penetrating radar, and they scanned the Longabout grave, and there is a coffin-shaped object next to their, I guess, his mom on the side, or whoever, which one of them. It's on one of the sides, and it's buried 8 feet down, not 6 feet down. So if you were to dig a grave, you're going to dig 6 feet. You're not going to hit that coffin. You'll never know that it's there. So there is a mysterious object next to the Longabout grave in the Morris Cemetery. Is it the Sundance Kid? I'm not allowed to tell you.
No?
It's in the Morris Cemetery. There's your, am I going the right way? Ah, okay. So now we're approximately 1900. We're standing by Brown's Cow right here. Everybody knows where that is, right? We're up at the corner church in Maine, looking down Main Street, across to the hotel up on the other side. We can see that there's no well, here's a motor car down here. There is indeed one. But most of the conveyance is still the horse and buggy. And there's the trolley that used to run through Phoenixville. It ran to Spring City and back. And at first it ran through copper wire and a thing on the top that, you know, touched that and got the electricity from it. And then at night, people kept stealing the wire. So they were like, one night they just kept it on, and nobody stole the wire. So whoever tried to steal that wire that night, he got the shock of his life, right? So here's the trolley going through Ironsides. This is where Redner's is, GameStop, that area. And it would have stopped at Bonnie Bray. Now I talk about this whole era through my story on Harry Houdini, who visited Phoenixville in 1917 and performed at the Colonial Theater, and he escaped from a burglar-proof safe. Now, I did a bunch of research on all of my stories, including this one, and I could find no history of him having to get out of a safe. And so you could picture, they're like, you know, he's like, what do you got for me? And you could picture the bank going, well, we got a safe. And now he's got to figure out, I got 24 hours to, you know, get out of this safe, right? So very interesting how he did it. But he spends the day at the Bonnie Bray amusement park called the Electric Park because it had electric supplied to it from the trolley line. At the Electric Park, there was a steam-powered carousel. There was shuffleball and shooting gallery, which probably shot real bullets at the time. And there was a zoo, and at the zoo they had white-tailed deer and a black bear and a bull elk and monkeys, apparently, and an ostrich and a camel. And so that's kind of cool that, you know, that was all at Bonnie Bray. So I have Houdini spending his afternoon visiting the park, and you can learn about the park through the story. And then here I have the safe put out front. You know, the photoshopped it one night only, the great Houdini, right? But you figure the bank's right next door, so I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe they brought it right out and...
Yeah. Makes sense.
Now, Harry was really, he knew how to play the press. And so he would always do these little things the day of to get people's attention. And one of the things was escape from a straitjacket from a building. We don't have any evidence that he did this in Phoenixville, but I have the Iron Guys throwing up a trellis on the top there and him doing his, you know, escape from. Now, we don't have any evidence it happened, right, which is why I have to write historical fiction on my book. But it's a more interesting story that way. Better than the story. Harry Houdini came to Phoenixville, escaped from a safe, the end. That's all we know, right? So you got to fill in all the blanks yourself. Here he is.
Bridge? Joe, was that made in Bridge?
That is, yes sir, that is Fade's Barber Shop right there. You got it. And so here I have Harry sitting in his safe, getting locked in. I did a lot of research as to how he pulled off some of this stuff. I read 2 big books on Houdini. One was 500 pages long. Didn't tell me how he did anything, right? It was just about him. I was like, oh, well, it was a very interesting book, but it didn't help me at all with what I need. So anyway, I did some research, and, you know, he may have, who knows how he did it. I got some theories.
Magically.
Now we go another 40 years. 1950, Philadelphia, not far from here. Some police are out sitting on patrol, and they look up. He says, "You see that?" The guy's last name was Keenan. It's not John Keenan, but it was Keenan. I always remember because John Keenan is president of the Historical Society for Wild Stuff. Anyway, so cops are like, "Do you see that? It's coming down like a parachute." And they're like, "Yeah, let's go, let's go." And so they drive to where they see it coming down, and they end up finding this translucent purple mass, a foot thick, 6 feet wide in a circle, and it's on the grass, but it doesn't weigh enough to bend the grass. It's just sitting on top of the grass. And they call other cops, and they come out, and they do call Philly FBI, but they're slow to respond. By the time they get there, the whole thing's evaporated. At one point, one of the cops just grabs some of it, puts it in his hand, and it kind of breaks up and liquefies and evaporated in his hand. They call it star jelly, and that story was the inspiration for the Blob. And so I have the story of how these gentlemen are sitting around, and they're talking about what kind of movie they want to make, and how these monster movies are all played out because it's always a humanoid in a costume, and he's like, I need something different. I need something that's going to be, you know, and so they came up with this concept from the star jelly story. Here are some of the locations that they filmed. Right across the street from Reeves Park, actually 1 block from here, was the doctor's house. Number 2, up at Mauer Road and Route 23, they just ripped down the garage that was at that corner, but that garage was in the movie. Oh, here it is. There it is. That's the garage. This is the number 1 spot over by Reeves Park. And then I would always show my 5th graders the Blob each year, and this is before the Colonial used to do it, right? That was way back in the 90s, I feel so old. But we would watch the Blob, and so they go to the front doors of Barclay, and it's locked. So the kid runs down here and he grabs a rock, and he comes up and he breaks the window with the rock, and they get into Barclay to get the fire extinguishers. So I would tell my kids, that rock is still out there. And darn if one kid doesn't come in one year, he's like, I found the rock, Mr. B. I found it. It was there. I was like, yeah, that's the rock. And then, of course, the Colonial with the famous running out scene that, you know, kind of really gave Phoenixville its, 2 minutes of fame there. Which brings us to the 1950s, and this is what it looked like when the Blob landed, and look at the size of these buildings. They are humongous. So this is all now the apartment buildings, right? Everybody can picture this, and the road runs along them, but that was all under one single roof, as were a lot of these. They were building big, huge, long stuff. They pulled the trains right into the building. You can see the train tracks run right in. The Foundry building is right here, and that's still there today, even if all the rest of it is gone.
I was just gonna say.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's fun looking at these old pictures. So that's my dad. I'd like to dedicate this talk to him. He should be the one here giving it, but instead it's me. So, and the end. All right, any questions? Open the floor. Yes, sir.
I was just out in the Sacramento Train Museum, and the first engine you see is from Phoenixville.
There you go. Wow. Yeah, unbelievable.
Isn't that cool?
Ah, we went to the Kinzua Bridge with the kids, and it's like, boom, from Phoenixville. The steel was made in Phoenixville. Yeah, unbelievable.
How is Paul Kuska doing?
He's doing well. He had shoulder surgery, and he's recovering well, and he'll be boxing again soon. I'm kidding about the boxing.
Charles
Yeah.
Pickering had a town and a creek named after him.
And a mill, there's the Pickering Mill on 113, Pickering Apartments, Pickering Run Apartments, right? What else do we got? Golf course, right? Yeah, there's a lot of Charles Pickering stuff around, absolutely. Who remembers the General Pike Inn? Yeah, and that was named for Zebulon Pike's Peak Zebulon, right here in Phoenixville, right? We used to have a thing named after him, so unbelievable. Yeah, Phoenixville's had its share of very famous people, and some we never even know about. One is a friend of mine, well, actually I'm friends with his daughter, and his name is Chuck Cantwell, and he helped design the Cobra Shelby GT350 with Carroll Shelby, and he came this close to being in that movie, Ferrari versus Ford. He was like, oh, I was working in that building right next to him, and yeah, so really, really cool. You know, Phoenixville's got all sorts of famous people. And then we've got the Phoenix wheel down here, right? Unbelievable. So the Ferris wheel was invented in Phoenixville, and Ferris kind of stole it from us. Wow. Yeah, it's kind of cool stuff. Yeah, so the story that I'm hearing, I don't have it officially yet, but is that that Phoenix wheel, the steel mill made 3 of them, just kind of like as a novelty. And then Ferris saw it and said, oh, I should make those, mass produce those. And Phoenixville didn't do that. We made, bridge parts and stuff. So it was just we made a couple and then we were done with it. But the oldest one found its way home after all this time, thanks to Barbara Cohen, right? And Schuylkill Heritage Society did a great job with that. Yeah. All right, yes?
So, the intersection of Nut Road and 113, I suppose.
Yes.
It's a marker that said this is the farthest west the British had ever gone.
Yes.
Now they've ripped that whole intersection apart last week.
They did.
And we're wondering what they're going to do with
they
Are they gonna put it back there?
No, the
marker?
stone is on the side,
Is it on the
next
side
to
now?
the,
By
what, Pat's
Walgreens.
Pizza, or what is it
Pat's,
now?
yeah,
It's changes
right
names
now.
every
But there
couple years.
was a marker, I thought, right in the,
Right.
right in the
Yeah,
center.
Yeah, so that marker's still there.
Are they gonna put it back there, or are they gonna put it
No,
somewhere?
it'll stay on the side.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's really, used to be people wanted to have their claim to fame, right? And so it's real debatable, like what's the farthest inland point that the British came on their invasion, right? So people are measuring, oh, well, we're farther inland than somebody that might be farther west than us, but because the coast came in, aha, we were farther inland than them. So it's not really the farthest west, I think, that the British came during the invasion. But yeah, it's a neat, another claim to fame for Phoenixville. The Gateway Pharmacy is called the Gateway because Phoenixville was the gateway to Valley Forge, which was a big tourist attraction for people to go there. So yeah, Phoenixville was the gateway. It's kind of neat. Yes?
Was the Blob filmed, does there a connection to a diner in Downingtown?
Yes, so the
Okay.
Downingtown Diner was the diner used in the film. Everybody used, including, I used to think it was the Val Rio, right? Because that made sense. And no, it's the Downingtown Diner, 14 miles away. Why they used that one, I'm not sure.
That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, in the movie, if you know where the things are shot, it's really funny because they go from the Colonial to Springford, or Royersford, and they're running down around the corner, and then it cuts to Downingtown, and you're like, wow, these people are really running. I was chasing them. Keep running.
That's funny.
Yes.
And my wife and I, we live on Graham Road, right off of Tinker Hill.
Oh, yes.
And I've been told that many of the homes built on Tinker Hill Road are above abandoned mines, making them unstable. Is there
They
any
are.
truth?
They are. That
Okay.
it's honeycombed all throughout that area, all the way from Route 29 and Baker Park, that area, right? White Horse Road, all the way across past Route 29, all the way to, I guess that would be like Charlestown Road. There were
Right.
mines all throughout there,
Okay.
and those tunnels are all sealed off to the surface, but they're still under there.
Okay.
At my house has a mine pit, and it was Raby's Iron Mine, and they were getting 1,600 pounds of ore out of that a day for a couple years. Well, if you do that math, there's gotta be like big tunnels even under my house. I'm like, wow, I've never been able to get to it. I dug around, I took like 4 or 5 feet of rock out of that trying to like get to it, and I'm like, I get to something down here. I lined all my flower beds all the way around the house with all the rocks, so, or something. Yes, sir.
One of your first flags,
Sure of that.
father grew up on Center Street.
Ah, yes, that was my great-grandfather.
Where's Cinder Street?
Cinder Street, I thought it was Walnut, and then I was told it wasn't. So I'm not real sure. I'm gonna have to do a little more research, but I thought that Cinder had turned into Walnut. But yeah, one of the gentlemen at the Historical Society set me straight. Those guys are great, they know their stuff. Yeah. They are living treasures over there, and I rue the day any one of them gets ill because so much Phoenixville history could be lost, you know what I mean? So, you know, I'm just trying to pick up pieces as I can, but there's nothing to,
right?
yeah, there's no way that you can match their lifetime of experience.
And
you
you're
know,
gonna
so-
get more involved.
Yeah, yes, please do.
Somebody told me that there were 5 movie theaters at one time in Phoenix.
Yeah, I know of the Rialto, the Colonial, of course.
There was one where the drive-in beer distributor is, somebody told me that. Is that true?
I'm not sure, maybe. Anybody got the names of one of the other ones?
Rootdown was
Rootdown.
one.
Because my father owned that building, he had a garage business there after the movie theater went down.
Yeah, I wish I could answer your question, but again, I'm a little too young for that, so. Before my time.
Well, I used to work in assisted living, and there was an old guy that grew up in Phoenixville, and he used to tell me stories all the time.
Nice.
And he told me there were 5 movie theaters. He told me there was a trolley that people would take from Phoenixville to Valley Forge
Yeah.
for their picnics.
Mhm.
And now there's that place along, one of the roads going towards Phoenixville, one of the back roads. There's a part of the track they dug up.
Oh, cool. Oh, very
And it's
cool.
marked.
Yeah. Oh, very nice. Yeah, now that guy again, did he pass?
Oh, yeah, long time ago.
Right, and boy, if we could have videotaped his stories,
Oh, and
right?
I
Yeah.
wish I did, really, but I had to do my job.
So, we do what's called oral histories at the Historical Society, and if you know anybody who has stories like that, very interesting in Phoenixville, please, or even just somebody who's lived here a lot, you know, contact us at the Historical Society, and we sit you down and videotape, and it's a very professional setup, and get your stories for future generations. That would be really cool. Yeah, please do.
Any questions from anyone on Zoom? Haven't heard from anybody on Zoom. Anybody have anything? Feel free to unmute. Okay, well, very good. Joe has copies, some copies of his book to sell up front. And those of you, those on Zoom, Joe, where can they find your book?
Okay, Gateway Pharmacy insists on autographed copies. So if you want an autographed copy, go to the Gateway Pharmacy. I believe you can also go to Ed Reed's and Company as well. Or you can get it, if you'd like, on Amazon. They bring it right to your door. Great. That's about. Or you could get one of my precious last 3 copies. Right here. I've often thought about doing Tales of Phoenixville too. Hopefully it'll happen someday. Some of the stories I have in there are some boys who spend their whole summer building a toboggan, and while the other kids are swimming at Raps Dam and doing all of these other things, they're like slaving building this toboggan because they got foresight. And then the day comes when they finally get the perfect weather and they drag it to the top of Hallman's Hill. And then these boys get on and start going down Hallman's Hill on a death run, because if you've ever been on Hallman's Hill, it's, what, a half mile to the bottom, and it's pretty steep. So I got my my killer toboggan story. I've got a story about a prize fighting match that took place in Kimberton, which was totally illegal and got all busted up. But they had like a prize fighting bare fist boxing match, and all these people came out, and yeah, and there was the time that one political party won the election and had a parade on this side of town, and it was really great, and then they went over the high bridge to the other side of town, and everything was dark, and they were like, this is really strange, and then they got ambushed and thrown bottles and rocks, and they had to run into the woods and make their way back across the French Creek. So yeah, all kinds of crazy things. When they dug the Black Rock Tunnel, they had Irish immigrants come out, and you know, they say kids are watching, you know, you're watching the internet all the time, you're always on your phone. But these guys were beating each other with axe handles. Sometimes maybe they should have had it. Here, this is called YouTube. Stop hitting each other with axe handles. But they describe in Annals of Phoenixville that these guys would get drunk and have sanguinary battles, so very bloody. And Irish were known for their stick fighting. It's just what they did for fun. You know, they beat each other. So yeah, so lots of fun stories for a possible Tales of Phoenixville Part 2 someday. But right now, I hope you get this one. Check it out. Learn something about Phoenixville history. Visit the Historical Society. Check out our newly renovated museum. We spent nearly $1 million. Was it $1 million, Angie? A lot of money on that. We got an elevator and everything. So come over, check it out, learn some stuff. That's where I'm heading right now, because we have a program going right now that is a day in the life of the colonial soldier, and it's geared towards youth, but anybody's invited. And that's a 3-part thing we're doing for America 250. Please check out our Facebook page. We got all of our information on there on our upcoming events. All right.
Joe,
Had
thanks
enough
so
of
much.
me. Thank you so much.